Hello, welcome to another episode of the Witko Podcast. I have a LaCroix here, freshly opened, ready to take a sip.
I have some pumpkin beer because it's October.
There you go. And before the podcast, I did a little bit of research, so tried to find articles that I could talk about today. And the first thing is actually something that I've been seeing all over the place. It's actually the DJI OSMO Pocket 3. This was actually a YouTube video that I was watching about it. And over here in the description, I saw a bunch of videos. It looks awesome. And it's actually combining a lot of aspects of cameras that I've been wanting for years. It has the gimbal technology, okay? And it's like super good. It has the face tracking. And man, this is like some of the future aspects of cameras. Well, it's the present aspects. And once you have this and you go beyond this and you reach even better aspects that I can't even think about right now, there's going to be some crazy technology for cameras. Like the Pocket 3 features a powerful 1-inch CMOS sensor and it captures 10-bit video in up to 4K 120 FPS. That's some epic stuff right there. And I'm glad that DJI is really stepping up here and putting out some really awesome camera technology because I think it's going to have some competition, okay, in the camera market, which we need to inspire all these other camera makers to do better. And that's really how all of technology in our society works is one company makes something, another company makes something, that company makes something better, and boom, the other company needs to make something better now. Progress. What do you think, Nick?
Yep, I mean that's basically how innovation occurs. One company gets bested by another, and they were known as, I guess, the best in there, and they need to try and grab that market back to get the best name. Um, then when nobody comes up with new ideas, one company usually owns it. Um, but I mainly only knew DJI for its drones.
Yeah, I'm glad they're really, getting into the camera market. They even have like a creator bundle type of thing with the wireless microphone, so that's cool. Just everything to make the process way easier and basically streamlined for the person that's going to be using the camera, making creation much easier. I mean, it's cool because we have cameras everywhere now, smartphone, regular cameras, and I think the next thing is probably going to be either some sort of smart glasses or VR headset, kind of like we're seeing with the Meta Quest 3, where people are recording stuff out in the world. And like, imagine if you have the VR headset, right? And then you're live streaming and you have the chat right there. So you're live streaming, you can see the chat, you're already POV. Let's say it has some good microphones, so you're picking up the voice, and then combine that with, like, let's say you have some sort of a switcher, and you can switch scenes, and you have like a drone following you. And so you're switching from POV to drone, and maybe you switch again, and there's somebody actually following you with a camera, or let's say you're holding a phone, and then you get a selfie option, you know, sh- uh, when you switch to scene as well, or even something like what cars have, where you switch the option and then it has like an above view. So there's so many cool things that can happen and that are on the horizon for camera technology. And like every time I think about it, I just imagine something new.
I mean, you're talking as if like Joe Schmo from down the street is gonna have all this. This is probably only gonna occur for the big streamers.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of things that happen for content creators or that content creators think about, sure, it starts off small, but then over time it gains a larger mainstream audience, just like with everything in technology, the internet, gaming, and whatever else you can think of that started off niche and then became popular.
The other thing I'm looking at DJ's website is that they are apparently using the drones for agricultural purposes to
Oh,
measure how
nice.
many crops there are, how much expected yield there is from there, and even using the drones to spray the crops.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what else they have in a pipeline. I mean, the stuff that they already released is awesome. Um, and I mean, this is the kind of stuff we need, the stuff that you don't really think of that's implemented and that pushes stuff forward. And here's the other thing. These things start off niche, they start off expensive, and then once they get into the mainstream, what happens? The price goes down. The things get cheaper to make. And I think there's pros and cons to this. Pros, it reaches a larger market, but sometimes, with these less expensive versions of the product, quality goes down, right? And I get it sometimes, especially for like laptops. Somebody wants a laptop. They just want something that works. They have the specs. They have something that works. Sure, it's made out of plastic and it could break easily, but for a lot of people, I would say, you get something with the specs and you're happy, right? For like a good amount of the mainstream audience. For me, though, when I see a laptop that isn't up to par with the quality components and I see that it could break, I'm talking about like the outside, the chassis, the hinges, the materials that it's made out of. I, I automatically am thinking, that's gonna break. Like, sure, it could work, but that's gonna break. And like, I think one company that really focuses on the at least exterior quality of the chassis and all that stuff and hinges and everything is Apple, right? And other companies have followed suit and implemented higher quality standards. It really depends what tier of computer you're getting. But I'm reading an article here that the low cost MacBook, the rumor that just won't die, but it might finally make sense. So Apple doesn't do cheap, this is saying here, but Apple Silicon could make a cheaper MacBook work. And I'm here in my mind wondering and thinking, please. I mean, it's very unlike Apple. I don't think they would release something with cheaper materials, something that would break easily, right? I think really what this article is saying is since they are using their own silicon and since, they're making more things in house, it seems that would allow them to create a cheaper MacBook. But whenever I see companies focusing on making something more mainstream or more affordable, I worry about that aspect of a cheaper laptop, like cheaper materials on a laptop or technology in general.
I mean, in terms of like how products start, look at EVs. EVs have started as usually just all luxury. Tesla first was all mainly luxury. Rivian is starting to get out of as much luxury as they were in. Um, Same with Lucid, even though I don't think Lucid's going to be a company that stays around. I just don't see that winning people over. Compared to I think Tesla, Rivian, and then all the other manufacturers that have existed producing regular cars, ICE cars. Um, they own the market right now. Like Lucid is losing money, the stock's not doing so well, but it just shows a natural progression. They had to start with luxury because they need to charge people a lot of money so that they can then continue investments into the other products that they're going to expand into. So like Tesla, they eventually ventured into like the SUV version, and then now it's Model 3. And then they're even doing, I think, the Model 2 eventually, which is going to be, I think, a cheaper version of the Model 3. So it's just the way innovation works. You can't, like, it's extremely costly to develop something new. Once you realize economies of scale and you're getting tons of people to purchase that product, um, you're able to then start decreasing costs and bring in the fold of everyone else that can't afford the high cost of the innovation, basically. So you have the chart. There's a chart out there that basically talks about innovation. You have the early adopters, and then you have the laggards, which are the people at the very end that don't usually get on board until it's kind of too late. Same thing like with smartphones. Almost everybody nowadays has a smartphone, but a lot of people that don't think it's usually necessary or don't want to spend the money on it, they're getting $200-$300 smartphones you can get at like Walmart versus getting an iPhone. Like there are people out there that just break their phone every year, regardless if it's an iPhone or just a $200-$300 smartphone. Um, so that's kind of how it is. Like as new things develop, they have to win the market first, and that's to start with people that are actually going to buy it. Like in the beginning, I wanted to adopt an EV, adopt or buy, or whatever term you want to use, but just cost is too high. Comparing that to the value you can get in even a hybrid, the I would end up getting a lower edition, lower version, whatever you want to call it, of an EV that wouldn't have everything that highest edition that costs less than a medium edition of the EV. So why would I adopt something also that if it's the first iteration, there's tons of stuff that could be wrong with it. So if I'm buying something that's very expensive, I want it to work. I don't want to buy it and regret that purchase, especially if I'm paying like over $50,000 for a car.
Yeah, and it also depends how the company operates, right? Like Apple, for example, usually wants to release a product that's already perfected. They basically study the market, see what people are releasing, and they won't release something until it's the perfected version of what's already been on the market. Samsung, for example, is completely different. They're releasing, you know, basically stuff that's right on the edge of progress with technology, pretty much, and it's not really perfected yet, and they've released multiple iterations of that until it is basically almost perfected. And then Apple still basically waits, studies the market more, and then years later releases something that's basically Apple perfect in a sense. Um,
When Apple first came around, they were one of if the first smartphone. So now you're saying they basically changed their philosophy, I guess you could say.
well, they weren't the first smartphones. They brought the first smartphone to the market that made smartphones mainstream and popular. There were smartphones before the iPhone.
Was that the Samsung Galaxy S3? I don't know.
Let's see. First smartphone. I might be wrong.
I'm talking about like
Yeah.
what we know it as.
Yeah.
Because you're saying they study the market, sure, but usually that means that somebody else has started it. Whereas, I mean, I was also very young when the iPhone kind of first launched and didn't have the money to just be able to buy anything I wanted. So I didn't really know if there's stuff before. I mean, yes, you have what would be considered early smartphone like a BlackBerry, but I'm talking about true to form smartphone that has no keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah. Smartphone as we know it, I guess Apple
I feel
was
like
the
Apple
first.
was the one that
Yeah.
pushed that forward because that's how I remember everything happening. Then you had all the competitors that try to pop up, like even had Microsoft do their phones, which I don't think Microsoft produces phones anymore.
Yeah. Did you say Microsoft producing phones?
I don't think they do
Yeah,
anymore.
the only type of phone device they have now is that Microsoft Duo. It's like a two-screened, essentially foldable, but it's not foldable like Samsung would do.
Gotcha. The other thing I was looking at, different topic, but I mean it's still technology. Apparently, Google wants to or has agreed to invest $2 billion in a AI rival, open AI rival. I think it's called Anthropic.
Who wants
It's
to
kind of
invest in
interesting,
that?
huh?
Who wants to invest in it?
Apparently, Google is going to put
Uh,
up to $2 billion in an artificial intelligence company called Anthropic kind of interests me because Google has Bard, so why would they
Hmm.
sponsor another company when they could just do their own? But I mean, then he could pay for it and then just acquire the company or a partner. And they're still trying to work against OpenAI, which is kind of the leader, I guess, in open or AI right now.
You know how I was mentioning um, I was mentioning the double tap features on my last video for the Apple Watch. So they're adding that to the Apple Series 9 and Ultra 2 watches. And that just has me thinking again, how many more devices will this double tapping feature be implemented on? And what other companies will come up with a different type of gesture? Or is this going to be the new mainstream? This double tapping gesture. Like, you know how everybody does the gestures now just on your phone, swiping? So is this double tapping thing going to be the new thing? Do you think it's going to stick? Or do you think it's just kind of like a. I mean, it seems pretty intuitive, especially on the headset.
When it comes to changes like that, I feel like people that are born later that never had the experience of the historical progress that has happened in technology, like me myself, I find that like you mentioned using gestures on the phone, I don't use them.
You don't?
Um, I'm
Well,
too ingrained into the way I've used technology since I was using it when I first got into technology. Now, yes, I do adopt certain things, but it's usually quality of life improvements that like, oh, it's now easier to open a new tab or go back. But if it's just a different way of doing something that it was still going to take the same amount of action. Like one big thing you got to think about, like think about in the e-commerce world, is the amount of clicks the user has to go through to find what they're looking for. It's the same thing as like innovations in technology and changing the way that user actually uses the product. Uh, if it's the same amount of input, I think it's least likely to be adopted by the majority in the beginning. As time goes on and the people that are using technology are no longer tied to that historical progress, they don't have the concept of you used to do stuff with your fingers, like on the device itself, versus now you could do this thing. Um, I think basically it's trying to erase your previous experience, which drives, fortunately or unfortunately, your future use of things. Um, if they took away the ability to use the old way of just touching the device itself, I would say sure, it would be adopted, but then you would also have people that would complain about that. That's why I think there's just certain things that don't become mainstream until maybe a decade later. Because if this is easier, it will take power. But if I could just as quickly touch the screen and do the same action in the same amount of time, it might not take hold.
I think it would have to be like supernatural. Supernatural. Like supernatural, as in very natural, as in like they showed on the headset video where someone is just sitting, like, and their arm is just resting, like on the chair. Like, I can't show you on camera now, but I'm raising my hand to the camera and I'm tapping. But imagine if I'm just resting it here on my chair rest and I'm tapping, and something happens. And let's say the camera on my laptop is tracking my eyes, and I tap, and something happens. I'm looking, and I tap, and something
But it
happens.
has to be seamless. That's the
Yeah.
point. If it's built in that it's tracking your eyes and tracking your hand, and I could just sit here doing this and not even have to use my mouse and keyboard on my computer, sure. But that goes into what I was talking about in the sense of less action.
Yeah.
Right now, I have to use mouse and keyboard to like open a new tab and to search something. But if I could sit there and just like have an on-screen keyboard that I could just click with my fingers and it would track my eyes to the letters, that is, in my opinion, less action because Right now, I have to use the mouse and keyboard versus sitting here and I could just look at the screen and not move and be, I guess, more comfortable. That is less action.
Yeah.
And so it'll be adopted more. Maybe not in the beginning. A lot of it's going to get people used to. And obviously, since this is probably only going to be on high end devices, it's going to go through that concept we just talked about before is the adoption. Only people with the free money to be able to buy that or the willingness to buy a technology that may not be seamless in the beginning. I would argue though that I would want that to work in the beginning and not have any issues where I'm getting frustrated that I'm going to go back because then I just regret spending, I don't know, $5,000 on something. And then what is a natural action?
Yeah.
Like this, we don't do too much besides picking stuff up. So now you have to retrain yourself that
Yeah.
this is a selecting grasp versus, I don't know, using this finger to go back versus using this finger to do something else versus maybe this, even though this is hard for a lot of people. Um,
I mean, I
Opening the
think
hand or
I
something.
think the reason they chose this is because of the fact it's kind of in the middle of natural and unnatural because they needed to kind of have something that's different that's different from just you doing normal hand movements.
Right, but they're not going to make something where you got to do this.
Nick, if you're just listening on audio, Nick put up both of his hands, touched both of his fingers together.
Index fingers.
Index fingers.
You just imagine going in public and you're like PPing your hands together to make an action, and people are like, "What is this guy doing?" Whereas, I mean, people will recognize that
Yeah.
most likely, like two fingers together, you could do it on one hand, and you could do it almost in any form, especially if it's just a watch that's tracking that movement.
Yeah. So apparently, Microsoft is reorganizing its Xbox marketing teams to prepare for an AI and gaming future. Xbox gets ready for Activision Blizzard, and Microsoft gets ready for more AI. So
I mean,
what?
everybody's diving into AI.
Yeah, I mean, so what should we expect though with, let's say, Xbox so for Xbox and Activision and Microsoft and AI, what are some of your predictions?
I mean, I haven't touched an Xbox since I think 360, so that's multiple generations ago. Um,
Well, there's one obvious one that I'm kind of thinking about right now when it comes to Xbox and Activision Blizzard.
Go ahead.
Do you think World of Warcraft will make its way to consoles?
They could have already done that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like consoles now aren't really any different than a computer. In the past they were. Now they're just a computer that's the people don't have to constantly update. They are guaranteed to be able to play the games that are coming out for that console for 5, 6 years, however long the consoles are new versions of consoles come out. So like PS4, PS5, PS6. Um, so they could already do it. It's just, would you enjoy playing World of Warcraft with a controller?
Well, that's the thing. That's what we were just talking about, right? Input and controls. If they spent the time on it and they did it right and it worked well and it was well optimized, I think they could do it. And I have seen a few examples done already. Just people messing around with it. It does seem to work. And like in the beginning, let's say they don't get it perfect right away, it could be used for simpler tasks, right? And then I mean, but again, they probably wouldn't just release it on the simple or task version. They would want to release a fully working version. But even let's say you would use it for simpler tasks, I think that would be cool just in general. Like for example, you could do a mobile version of WoW for simpler tasks. That could be done for sure. And then for the console one, if the controls are optimized right, they could easily have a full version.
Yeah, I just think playing World of Warcraft, where most of the game after doing the basics, which like when new expansions come out, you could pretty much finish the expansion in like a week. But that doesn't include like raids and then dungeon runs, which all of that is continuous running again and again and using spells and doing your position, which is either tank, DPS, or healing. And on a controller, it could work. They just need to simplify the amount of spells, which I don't think they're going to do because the whole thing is about using abilities.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you could do it. You just have to arrange the spells in a certain way. So let's say one line, you have your spells, and then it's separated, and then another line separated, another line. Or even it could look the same as it does now, but let's say you're playing a game, and then you press a button, and it brings it down to the next line of spells, and you can choose from there. There's ways you could do it that it could work.
But if you plan to allow then the competitive side, PvP side of it, people on computer have a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
We have all this technology going into keyboards and mice to make them respond faster, to make macros easier. And if you're stuck on the controller,
Well, I mean,
I'd argue,
that's already happening on cross-platform games where they allow PC and consoles. You see a lot of the PC gamers like owning, and like that's been a thing already.
yeah. But some games have the option to turn off crossplay.
Hmm.
So you don't have to suffer to somebody that's got like the best mouse and has like perfect, pitch perfect movement on the mouse and just can snipe you in 1 second, like for instance in like PUBG or something.
And then again, there are like some people that are extremely dedicated and will be beasts at the game no matter what they use. I guarantee you, if there was somebody playing on a controller versus me on a keyboard, they would win on the controller. There's people that are just better no matter what. If it's on a controller and then somebody just sucks in general on a keyboard or whatever, the controller person is going to win.
Yeah, but how many people aren't better?
Yeah.
Like people that play on computer are usually gamers.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see what Microsoft does with Activision Blizzard. Um, so I'm reading. I haven't really been keeping up with Magic the Gathering lately, but apparently there's the Magic the Gathering, the Lost Caverns of I don't even know how to say that word. Ixalan unveils its vampire god. So you got here this Alkalot's mechanics, or however you say it. It's a legendary creature. It's a bat god. Alkalot's deepest betrayal. It has flying, lifelink, and whenever this Alkazatz attacks, each opponent discards a card for each opponent who can't draw a card. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. When Alkalatz dies, return it to the battlefield, tapped and transformed under its owner's control. That's one card. It's a 4/4. And then there's another card, the Sanguine Evangelist. It's a creature vampire cleric. That's cool. Anything with a vampire piques my interest. Battle cry. So whenever this creature attacks, each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn. When when Sanguine Evangelist enters the battlefield or dies, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. It's a 2/1. So they got these two new cards. Right away, I like the vampire one, and even that bat god looks cool. The art on Magic the Gathering always like had always was very fascinating to me and really got my creative juices flowing. I remember when we were younger, you showed me your Magic the Gathering cards, and even just, I was looking just at a simple land card, right? And I was just amazed um, at the art of it.
You didn't even mention the best thing. I mean, I found this because I don't follow Magic anymore. I went into a card store 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think that was it. Yeah, two. No, was it last week? It might have been 2 weeks ago. And just seeing like all the differences, it's just a lot to keep up with. Same with anything. I feel like the further I grow in my career, the harder it is for me to keep up with the stuff that I would like to be interested in. But I mean, all of it costs money. You got to buy the new set every 3 months or whatever they cadence their release on. Same with technology um, and everything. But they have Jurassic Park cards for the set. Jurassic
Oh,
World,
wow.
I guess, is the best way to call it.
That's cool.
Um, so they have like a card called Ellie and Alan, paleontologists. So it's, I guess, I don't know if that's like who they are. I know from the movies, I recognize them, but they also have Ian Malcolm, who is Jeff Goldblum, I think that's his
Ah,
name.
yeah, 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 yeah.
They have a card for him. He's a legendary creature, human scientist.
Nice.
Whenever a player draws their second card each turn, that player exiles the top of their library. Uh, I mean, doesn't really seem too interesting. The second thing says during each player's turn, that player may cast a spell from among the cards that they don't own, exiled with Ian Malcolm, K. Odison, Chaotician, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. And it says, "You've heard of Chaos Theory," as like the quote on the card. They have also the Command Tower, which is like the pyramid, I guess, from one of the Jurassic movies. And then they have the Indoraptor, perfect hybrid of a raptor thing. And then there's also Ravenous Tyrannosaurus, and on there they have um, the dinosaur alive in like one of the exhibits with the dinosaurs ruled ruled the earth like banner. It's kind of just reminiscent of Jurassic Park movies.
Did you see that Post Malone bought that $2 million Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering card?
Yes.
Yeah, that's epic. Yeah, it's amazing to me, and I'm very glad that Magic the Gathering is still going. I mean, it's like the oldest or one of the oldest trading card games.
Around there.
Yeah.
It's just I think for card games, if there's too many out, you're gonna have too many people split. You kind of need a big base to keep the card game alive, and I think Magic has that. Pokemon has that just because it's nostalgia, but I've never really played Pokemon like
Yeah.
a game of it. I think they even have Yu-Gi-Oh still. No, they have Digimon. They come out with like new ones, but I think it just segments the market. Like, who wants to pay for each new set for each new like I guess universe?
Hmm.
Um, it's just a lot of money to put into it. Having something that even though you can't really use the older cards in like professional games of Magic unless you're playing a specific version. Um, as with friends, you could use them. I just don't like that sometimes the new sets come out and they're so much overpowered compared to the older cards.
I wonder, has there ever been like a. Wait a second. Okay, I think I remember now. There was a Dungeons and Dragons movie, right? Yeah, there was. It was called like Thieves something. Dungeons and Dragons. I want to see that. I didn't get to see that yet. Dungeons and Dragons Horror Among Thieves.
Honor among
Oh,
these.
sorry. Honor Among Thieves, yes. Yeah. Did you
Yeah,
know
the
that?
reason why I don't know, I just Googled it. The reason why I don't know about it is because I haven't really been kept keeping up with movies as much as TV shows, but now I've seen it. I think I saw an ad for it last month or something. It's just
Yeah.
a lot of stuff doesn't stick in my brain anymore like it used to.
A sneak peek at the lunar camera destined for the Artemis missions. NASA augmented parts of commercially available and mirrorless cameras to handle the moon's harsh environment. So there is this camera here that's wrapped in like this sort of fabric thing with two straps, and I think again, camera progression here to have a camera that's going to work well on a space mission. That's pretty epic. Um, you know,
What type of camera?
it's it's they made it with commercially available and mirrorless cameras. So I guess they made it from multiple different cameras or
Oh, it's a
whatever.
handheld for the
Yeah,
astronaut
handheld,
to use.
handheld. Yes. So that's cool that they can walk around and probably take pictures and hopefully video. That'd be cool. Um,
Yeah, but we have robots that are great at doing this.
yeah, I understand that, but again, there's a human aspect to video and photo creation that a human is walking. I mean, sure, a human could take pictures from the drone or whatever, but imagine you're just walking along or floating along or whatever the hell, and you see something, and you could just take the picture like a normal camera. I think there's something cool about that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how many humans have we put on a body outside the Earth. We don't really do human man missions anymore
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
moon. Nobody's gone to Mars yet. That's what I'm saying is like it's great, but we have robots that most likely before we get anybody landed on Mars, we're gonna have a very good understanding of what it looks like. The only thing it's going to be beneficial for is where the rover can't go, like if there's a cave and the rover can't get in there.
I've
But
go ahead.
there's also the rover that has the helicopter, so
I have a question for you. Once we start colonizing either the moon or Mars, let's just say Mars right now, how do you think that culture and society is going to function? What do you think the architecture is going to look like? What do you think the people are going to be like? What do you think the culture is going to be like? What do you think the Martian government is going to be like? I have an idea of it, but what do you think? And then I'll explain mine after.
I mean, architecture is going to be based off of function, not form.
Yeah.
Like if we can't just terraform Mars and we have to live in a dome bubble or whatever, it's going to take a certain form because of the need for it
Yeah.
and the way that it needs to be built and to keep costs most likely. Architecture on Earth is done the way we do it because we have the ability to change anything we want and produce anything we want in a certain way. Like humans want to be artists. There's architects out there that build buildings that are amazing to look at, but that's because we don't have a form requirement. In the past, we may have, but nowadays we can form almost anything. We now need to figure out how do we either build stuff on that planet or get it over there, and the cargo transfer to that planet is going to dictate what form it can be in. We're not going to sit there with these elaborate structures that are huge because they're going to be put together by pieces. They got to be transported off Earth most likely or built in space. But even that's going to have a different form because now you don't have gravity assisting with the production unless you create artificial gravity, which we don't really do too much with. So that government, I mean, depends which stage you're thinking. It's most likely going to be run de facto off planet. Um, Now, it's as anything, like it's the same thing as like the International Space Station. That's off Earth. You can't really control what goes on up there, but they don't really have an option to go anywhere else.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to escape if the government comes for them. But it's going to be a huge crisis, and one that I don't think we've ever had is if like somebody murders somebody on the International Space Station. Like if that person's not willing to leave, they need to send astronauts up there to basically arrest them.
Mm. No, that is interesting.
So, but they're going to be controlled by Earth most likely until it gets to a point where there's too many people, and now they need to start deciding on what they want. Just like how we have different countries here, our needs are different from another country. Like we live in a different, even by state in the U.S. here is the needs of people in California are completely different than the needs of people in the middle of the country. California's next to the ocean, while people in the middle of the country aren't. They have different needs, and this California should not control that. Um, that's basically it. Like it's still too soon. We talk about and you have SpaceX that wants to go to Mars, but it's gonna be a while, especially because all these things that pop up. We have recessions coming and the pandemics that slowed stuff down, and you have wars going on now. Stuff changes rapidly, and as we all know about our own innovation, like who knows what AI will bring? Maybe it'll speed it up.
So I think it kind of depends who's chosen to go first, right? So and it depends how diverse that group of people is. Like for example, if you choose all scientists to go, the culture and the society is going to be very science based. Of course, people will have their little side things, creative aspects, and this and that they naturally have, but mostly it would be science based. If you pick, for example, scientists, artists, musicians, people that are there for, you know, I forgot what you would call it, but people that are into plants, people that are into studying rocks or whatever, uh, people that are in all sorts of aspects, all sorts of fields. If you pick, like, let's say, the most important fields that would benefit the mission, then that's what your society will kind of expand from. So that's society culture aspect, and then as for the architecture, you're right. Um, but it also it would be more forms, so like domes and stuff like that. But also, like, you have Elon Musk, where his ship was based off of the wasn't it based off the Spaceballs movie?
I mean, it can be, but it still has to fit
Yeah,
into the function of what it needs to do. You can't build a ship to get off this planet that's a rectangle.
of course. I mean, I think you could make stuff that's functional and still looks cool. But
Well, we do make structures in humanity here that don't make sense. Have
yeah,
you
of
ever seen the
course.
house that's upside down?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is like we can play with it because if you have the money, you can do anything you want here. Sure, you if you had the money, you could do anything you want, but no, I don't think no single human is rich enough with the free cash because most people that are rich don't have it in cash. It's based off of their ownings of stock and stuff like that, which is not cash. So any human doesn't have enough money to build whatever they want to get off the planet to then put it on another planet. Once we have the ability to go over there and then build it on that planet or build it in space and land it there without having the need to get it off of one gravity and into another, you can build whatever you want. But in the beginning, and even then, like you said, are artists gonna have a big enough, I guess you could say, population compared to scientists? Scientists are gonna be the most critical in the beginning.
Yeah, I was gonna say, especially
Plants,
exactly.
plants, and then not only that, but engineers too.
Mhm.
Like you can bring two, three, five artists, but they can only do so much, and they're not really going to dictate too much in the beginning of how stuff is
Mhm.
because people need to survive. If you can't terraform the planet to turn it into a whole system where you can breathe on, and you have to live in a dome, there's only so much an artist can do.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, yes, it mostly would be science based, and you can get people who are like good with art and also science, so they could be, more helpful. And also, like, people can learn, right? People can be trained, so you can have somebody, help out in multiple ways. Like, yeah, people adapt pretty easily, so. But yes, it'd mostly be science based. Uh, Culture and society, at least in the beginning.
Like there's just so much stuff that's like we are able to get into on our planet because we've perfected certain things. Like for instance, you can make a gun for form just to use because you're gonna go hunting. But we got to the point where you can spend 50,000, $2 million on a gun, and it's gonna be hand carved. It's gonna have little designs in it of like whatever. Like some of the designs I see some of these manufacturers make, they do stuff to commemorate things. Like Rocky, uh, aka Sylvester Stallone, had a gun made for him that's commemorating his acting and I guess inspiration to others from that film. You have guns that are engraved in to commemorate like Rome. It's like, why are we doing that? The gun was created in the original sense to go hunting, and then in turn we turn that into a form of art.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a collectible.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with coins. Coins were created as a form of currency so that we didn't have to barter anymore, where I give you 500 bundles of corn and you're giving me my house. You're building my house.
So,
So coins were the intermediary, and now there are coins out there that are collecting.
so are you kind of saying that stuff that's used as function in a beginning will later have aspects of art implemented into it as our society and culture adapts and progresses?
Yeah, like if we go to Mars, and then in the beginning, there's not going to be a film industry on Mars.
Yeah.
Film industry on Mars is going to be filming what's there,
Yeah.
and the guess innovation in building of Mars. But once it gets to more of a city, you don't have to worry about the fact that there's limitations on food, there's limitations on air, there's limitations on all this stuff. Then people are like, all right, well, they're going to want to commemorate the past of Mars. They want to commemorate the first settlers. And I mean, we still do that today. We have commemorations of the first settlers of America. Um, we have commemorations of the founding of America. We have commemorations of wars, even. And those all have art given into it. When you're on Mars, it's mainly going to be driven in would you want that, though, by what happened on Earth. Because there's no history on Mars. A lot of the stuff that we develop art around is based on history.
Yeah.
But you can do forms of art that isn't based on history. Like you could do like just shapes and I guess I don't know if the term is impressionistic art, but art that really doesn't have any purpose other than looking interesting or nice, um, which you could do on Mars. But I don't think people are going to be paying attention to that in the beginning. You're not going to have the ability to say, "Oh, I have a free weekend to um, paint whatever I want." It's gonna be a struggle in the beginning for food and constant work. It's almost as if you're gonna be working full time your whole life if you're on Mars. Here, we don't work full time because we also want to enjoy our time.
So
While
so
people will need breaks there too, they could do art. It's not going to be like, oh, now this piece is going to be worth $10 million.
yeah.
It'll might be worth $10 million, but they had to bring it back to Earth.
Yeah. So as time goes on and our society progresses, people have naturally, or as a result of progression, have more time to spend as they would like, or spend on luxuries, or spend on art, creating art, because as society progresses, we get the time to do more creative endeavors, correct?
Yeah. I mean, not that I was around during this time, but I would be interested to know, like, when the settlers first came over from Europe. But even then, they were only going across an ocean on a planet that we had the ability to get food. They came to a land that wasn't really inhabited, and there's food there. When you go to Mars, it's not like, oh, there's plants there. So there's different adversities or conditions that you are doing when you do interplanetary travel and uh, colonization versus on the same planet that we've always been on. Like, no matter where you go around the world, you're gonna have access to most likely food and water. Mars, you don't have access to either. So it's unfortunately going to be a battle in the beginning to get that set up so that way they're not going to die of starvation, die of lack of water, which is what humans need. That's why terraforming is going to have thing. If we could terraform the entire planet really fast, then it'd be the same thing as Earth. But if we had to live in domes, there's going to be extreme limitations because you can only grow so much food in the dome because what are you going to build a dome around the entire planet? So there will be art, but I feel like it's going to be limited in the beginning, and then most of the art that's going to come from that is memorizing the history of that colonization, and then a lot of it's going to be Earth influence because that's where we're all from, versus thinking about the fact that okay, people on Earth, the art's different because people have different cultures. Now, when you send people to Mars, you might have cultures from each part of the planet but it's still going to be Earth influenced.
Yep,
The only time it won't be is once you start having generations that have not seen Earth.
that's right. So I see another article here. Earth-like plate tectonics may have shaped Venus billions of years ago. A new study bolsters the theory that microbial life could have existed on our sister planet. So that got me thinking. Okay, so that's interesting that Earth like plate tectonics may have shaped Venus. And then it's also interesting that microbial life may have existed on Venus. Venus, I think some scientists think that Venus used to be a lot like Earth, and then it turned into Venus. And that got me thinking how would, and this would take like a lot of years for this, you know, it's a slow, I guess, progression, but how do you think our society would react and adapt to our planet potentially becoming another Venus? Like what, because if we still have if we have technology and we can slowly adapt to survive on a planet that's no longer technically habitable, right? What would be the steps that would happen, and how do you think it would happen? Because if we're already thinking about surviving on Mars from scratch and we have all these ways of doing it, how would we adapt a current society to live on a planet that's not habitable anymore, where people are already living? What's the best way to do that, or how do you think it would happen?
You make the question more simple. You're talking about Earth becoming uninhabitable.
But yes, basically, what if Earth became the next Venus or the next Mars?
I mean, it'd be very bad for the majority of society. lot of people would die. You can't just evacuate entire population.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, this would happen. It wouldn't happen overnight.
yeah, but we still don't have the ability. So if it happens in even our kids' lifetime or our grandkids' lifetime, like it's too soon. We most likely will still be in the infancy stages of another planet colonization. It's going to change a lot of stuff. Like it depends how long are we on these other planets. The time frame is all what it comes down to. If we become an interplanetary species and have spent centuries on another planet, like you got to think about how long humans have been on Earth. All of the innovations and everything, like if we don't have the same things we have done here built on another planet, we might fall into the Stone Age again.
So you're
If we
saying, so you're saying that if we already haven't made progress on another planet and our planet is becoming uninhabitable, we are less likely to succeed. But if we had made progress on another planet, we can take the things we've learned there and apply it to Earth, and also have a second home for humanity.
Oh, you're talking about saving Earth.
I'm I'm talking about if we can't save Earth, we can at least learn how to adapt and live on it, right? Like with domes or underground or something. But like if we don't practice on other planets first, how to survive and adapt and build stuff from scratch, it's going to be harder to adapt here on Earth. Sure, it might be a little bit easier because we already have everything here and we can build it. But if we get practice on other planets, I think we can apply some of the things we learned there here. And yes, of course, it would be better to save the planet first before this stuff happens. But what if some unforeseeable things happen that change the way the Earth operates and it becomes uninhabitable and we have to live in domes or underground or something like that?
I mean, it really depends upon what happens to the
Yeah,
planet.
yeah,
Well, like we're talking about living on Mars, which is because Mars is the closest thing to Earth in terms of almost gravity, in terms of the fact that like atmosphere, no atmosphere. The reason why we're not going to go and try and live on Venus is because you're talking about a planet that has an atmosphere that's very dangerous to humans. It's
yep,
very hot and it's very filled with toxic gas.
yep,
So we're not going to go there because it's not just that, oh, there's no oxygen present
yeah.
and we don't have food and water. Those are very simple things to solve, even though they're very complex on a planet that doesn't have any issues with it. If Earth has radiation that we have to deal with, we're not going to stay here. If Earth suddenly becomes 50 degrees warmer, and that's very conservative, um, we're not going to stay here. If Earth is 1,000 degrees warmer, we will not be here. We will not be able to survive here. Like the amount of technology, the amount of innovation that would need to happen to live on any planet that's closer to the sun than us is not in humanity's best interest. You need to go to a planet like Mars because there's less adversity that humans are going to face there. It's going to be easier to terraform that planet and be able to survive on it than Venus or Mercury. Because, like, we've had stuff land on those planets. Like, the Soviet Union has landed stuff on Venus before. I don't know if the US has, probably at some point. But everything that's landed there has typically been destroyed within a half an hour.
Yeah.
So
Because of the gravity or because of I forgot exactly how Venus operates there with
it's
the
the
gravity,
temperature and pressure.
temperature and pressure. Okay.
It's because it has an atmosphere. It's just not an atmosphere we can survive in, and in turn, it doesn't have an atmosphere that anything we build. Versus, think about it this way. So we've sent all these robots to different planets. We've sent robots to Venus and Mercury to see what's there and see what would happen. Well, we know what happens. It destroys the stuff in less than an hour. You go to Mars, our robots have been on there. When we build some of these robots, we only anticipate them to be on that planet for 6 months. Some of those robots have lasted for 10 years. So you can see the difference that there's no forces that are destroying the robots on Mars besides dust storms and just decay of the product of the robot itself over time because it's got sand getting into
Mm.
parts versus we have to then spend millions and more dollars to figure out how can we protect something to last 2 hours instead of 1 hour on Venus.
Yep, yep, yep.
Much more advantageous because we live in a society where nothing's free. Even if humanity worked together to do stuff for free, the amount of innovation that would need to happen for that versus to get us to Mars is completely different. And so if Earth gets destroyed in any form that's just increases the temperature to an absurd rate, or there's something in the atmosphere like extreme radiation, like think about it this way. We had a robot that we sent to go and look at the elephant's foot in Chernobyl. That robot got destroyed. Like cameras are affected by uh, radiation. So are robots. The signal gets destroyed.
Wow.
Something happens with the radiation. So if our whole planet nukes, just we nuke ourselves to death and we have to leave the planet, we're not going to spend the effort to try and stay here.
Mm.
We're going to have to let time fix it and move to another planet and then figure out, hey, is there something else in the next solar system or whatever you want to call it um, that can support life? It's easier to go somewhere that has less impact on something than more impact, even if humans work together for the common cause. Innovation to do certain things is easier than to do others. Think about it this way. It's easier for us to go to Mars than it is to go to the deepest part of the ocean
Yeah, yeah.
because of the amount of pressure that you have to deal with of the water pushing in. You don't have that on Mars. You have that on Venus. So again, it all depends what happens to Earth. If the atmosphere just leaves Earth, we lose the ozone layer and the atmosphere is just gone. It's going to be a lot easier to do it because hopefully then if we're on Mars, we have the experience to be able to repair that. But if it's destroyed by radiation, um, sulfur gets all over for some reason, like let's just say volcanoes just don't stop erupting, we won't be able to survive. We can't stay here.
Yeah, it's definitely super trippy to think about, but I think it's something we as a society should think about, and hopefully more people think about it. Um, do you have any other articles pulled up?
No, not really. I mean, I can pull them up. Mostly just looking at technology. I mean, there's not been so much news lately just because the way the world is in terms of recession and concerns about trying to just live on our own planet. I think once the after effects of COVID and inflation, all that tamper, we'll be able to start talking about more interesting things. But there's a lot of stuff happening that's going to. I mean, there will be innovations. There's innovations, unfortunately, that come out of war. We all know what's happening in like the Russian-Ukrainian war. The fact that the way the war is fought been changed by drones. But that's not really stuff that going to bring us to another planet.
Mm, yeah, war is a weird, unfortunate thing of our society.
When people struggle, you're less likely to get interesting stuff out because the people that are creating these articles or these thoughts or these innovations don't have to worry about where they're going to eat next. So whenever recessions hit, like I feel like news slows down. Like think about the stock market right now. It's been down every day in this past week, and you're not hearing much. Companies like Ford just said that they're pausing their $12 billion investment in EVs because of inflation and the fact that the EV market's starting to slow. Most likely, it's because people are starting to realize that EVs aren't this end all be all. Like me, I wanted an EV, but I bought a hybrid instead. Um, so not only that, but also the fact that you have in terms people asking for raises like the union, which eats into the fact that now that money that they were going to have to invest to innovate would be being paid to people now. Not that people shouldn't be paid more, but you're not going to get news articles out of Ford making something very innovative because they're pausing their work. Just reaction in the market. Like there are companies that will invest through, but it's not going to be the EV industry.
Did you see Tesla unveiled their new stealth gray color? It's like a
What for the Cybertruck?
no, I think for their Tesla regular sedan Teslas, I think it's like a shiny metallic color. I think it looks pretty epic.
The thing is though, like I already see this because people get aftermarket stuff done.
Yeah,
Like I've seen so many. It looks like it's. I don't know if this is it. Is it supposed to be shiny or supposed to be matte?
it looks shiny to me. I think that was what stood out the most to me, actually, the fact that it was like extremely shiny. Even when they were pouring it in the video or whatever they were doing, it looked shiny, like really shiny, like shinier than shiny almost. Like because paint is already shiny, right? This is like extra shiny.
Yeah, I don't know. But like that's the thing is most of the stuff that you see in the news right now is just about economics, not really innovation. I mean, you gotta think about it this way. The only time innovation happens is when people can invest in it. And companies use loans to invest. Right now, because interest rates are so high, they can't invest as much. And that's why there isn't that much change going on in terms of what's going to happen. So once the economy starts tampering, they should be able to start seeing stuff again. Um, but most likely a recession will have to happen first. Like we'll still have some innovations, but it's usually stuff that's already been worked on.
Mm.
Like the fact that um, everybody's converting to the Tesla charging standard, and then you have uh, Apple working on the gesture thing, and most likely that VR headset, I think, or is it AR headset? I don't remember what it's supposed to be.
If
But
you're talking about
new
the meta,
stuff, it's going to come out slower. You're not going to see as much news. Because the other thing is, too, is if a company is going to produce stuff innovative, people are usually going to want to buy that, which is going to fuel their revenue, which is in turn going to drive their stock price up. Stocks are down right now, so people are pulling their money out of stocks and moving it into quote unquote safer vehicles, which is like your savings account, bonds, because you can almost guarantee yourself 6% interest. Whereas in the stock market, right now, almost everybody's down. So when you're pulling money out of that, just the way sometimes economics works.
well, I think this is a good time to end the podcast. Yes,
Yep.
we had a good conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you, Nick. We covered a lot of good topics. This is a good one. I like this one. This is fun, good flow, lots of energy. All right, we'll see everybody on the next episode. Peace, sayonara, enjoy.
Good night.